Here at Bethel, we have some of the most outstanding young men in the organization. We are grateful to Jehovah for you and want to commend you for how hard you've worked to meet the high requirements to serve here. There's a particular requirement that Jehovah expects of all who worship him that we want to discuss with you. At 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 16, he says, "You must be holy because I am holy." So, what exactly does it mean to be holy? It means to keep clean before Jehovah and not let sin or the world contaminate us. That's not easy for an imperfect man, but it certainly isn't beyond us either. Jehovah expects us to imitate him to the best of our ability and love what's right and hate what's bad. Bethel is a holy place, but serving here doesn't mean that you're automatically going to remain holy. Satan's world loves practices that Jehovah hates and promotes them as completely normal. Frankly, we might be drawn to some of those things. The question is, what do you have to do to keep yourself clean before Jehovah? If you go to Psalm 119, verse 9, we can find the answer. How can a young man keep his path clean? By keeping on guard according to your word. So, to keep yourself clean or holy in Jehovah's eyes, you have to keep on guard. In other words, make a constant effort. Just like Bethel is clean because we all work at keeping it that way every day, each of us has to daily work at keeping our conduct clean, according to Jehovah's standards in the Bible. If we don't, our service to him will become contaminated and won't please him. The governing body loves you and wants you to experience the great joy that comes from serving Jehovah with a clean conscience. They also want you to avoid the deep pain that comes with sinning against him. That's why we're going to share with you frank and specific counsel related to matters of conduct in two areas. First, your personal habits, and second, your dealings with others. We'll see some dangers you need to keep on guard against in these areas, and then how you can keep your path clean. There is no reason to be embarrassed about what we're going to discuss. You need to understand these matters to keep clean before Jehovah and enjoy his blessing. To begin, let's see 3 ways in which Jehovah's Word helps you to keep your personal habits clean. The first way you can do this is by avoiding tight-fitting clothes that can identify you with homosexuality. What kind of clothes are we talking about? Some outfits are designed to feminize a man's appearance, as homosexuals try to do, especially displaying the buttocks and genitals. Why? Because it makes it harder to tell the difference between a homosexual and a heterosexual man, making homosexuals blend in. So these clothes contribute to changing people's opinion of homosexuality because they come to see it as normal and acceptable. We know that you never intentionally promote that practice, but the question is, how would Jehovah view a man that serves him while dressed in a way that identifies him with homosexuality? Let's read Deuteronomy 22, verse 5, and get his feelings on this. Deuteronomy 22 and verse 5 says, "A woman must not put on the clothing of a man, nor should a man wear the clothing of a woman. For anyone doing so is detestable to Jehovah your God." So, what does Jehovah think of styles of dress that make a man look more feminine? Clearly, this is very displeasing to him. Does the way you dress show that you share his viewpoint? There's another factor to take into account. What effect could your dressing in this way have on your brothers and sisters? These clothes are designed to sexually excite both men and women. Of course, it's not your fault if someone else decides to nurture bad thoughts, but you wouldn't want to spark a wrong desire in others or be responsible for making it harder for them to resist bad thoughts. A second way you need to keep on guard is resisting the unclean habit of masturbation. The God's Love book explains that masturbation is the stroking or rubbing of the genital organs, commonly resulting in an orgasm. So, does a person have to use their hands to masturbate? For example, say a brother wears an undergarment that's so tight it rubs his penis as he moves around. He gets aroused and even ejaculates. Is he masturbating? Yes, he is, because he's deliberately stimulating his genitals, even though he's not using his hands. Does there have to be an orgasm for it to be considered masturbation? Suppose a brother starts rubbing his genitals against a pillow. He gets an erection, but stops before having an orgasm. Is he masturbating? Yes, again, because he's deliberately stimulating himself, whether he has an orgasm or not. How about having an emission of semen at night, maybe even after an erotic dream? Is that masturbation? No. Jehovah made that a part of a man's reproductive system, and it happens without any deliberate stimulation. But even so, when this happens to you, it would be good to examine whether you were dwelling on sexual thoughts before going to sleep. Could you have been sleeping in a position that stimulated you, such as with a blanket or pillow held tightly between your legs? If you're honest with yourself about these matters, it will help you to avoid falling into unclean practices. What effect does masturbation have on a person's sacred service? 2 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 1 explains what Jehovah expects of us. It says, "Therefore, since we have these promises, beloved ones, let us cleanse ourselves of every defilement of flesh and spirit, perfecting holiness in the fear of God." So Jehovah wants us to cleanse ourselves of anything that defiles our spirit. In other words, anything that contaminates our mental attitude. Masturbation contaminates a man with selfishness, it weakens his self-control, and it makes him believe that sex doesn't have to be related to love. It also fills a Christian with guilt. Trying to keep your service to Jehovah holy while under the influence of masturbation is like trying to climb a mountain with a large boulder that you're carrying. Until you free yourself of it, it can only hold you back. What have you done to cultivate a deep disgust for this practice so as to keep yourself clean? Our third point, don't let yourself become contaminated with pornography. Satan's world is in love with it in all its forms. But as you know, pornography in any form is not tolerated at Bethel. What can you do to guard yourself against becoming contaminated with pornography, even by accident? Take precautions to keep yourself as far away from its path as possible. Think of the following situation. While in the bathroom, a brother starts browsing through a list of recommended pictures and videos on a social media app on his phone. He comes across provocative pictures of men or women. Some may be topless and some may be nude. He doesn't tap on them, but he does keep looking and starts to masturbate. Now, did this brother truly stumble upon pornography by accident? Or could it be that he was browsing in a place where he actually hoped to find something sexually arousing? Either way, he needs to examine himself honestly, don't you think? Maybe it would be best for him not to use the internet while isolated from others. What precautions can you take to avoid such a situation? Could certain types of entertainment expose you to the contamination of pornography, even if they're not, strictly speaking, pornographic? Suppose a brother is watching a TV program for mature audiences that contains a sex scene. Now, the scene is shot from an angle so that you can't see the intimate parts of either person. But he replays it several times and gets aroused. Is he keeping himself clean from the influence of pornography? There may not be any visible nudity, but that scene is definitely designed to arouse the person viewing it, and that's why he's viewing it over and over. He needs to work on hating what is bad. What steps do you take to avoid entertainment that could lead you to pornography? Romans 6, verse 13 explains why we have to keep on guard in this matter. It says, "Neither go on presenting your bodies to sin as weapons of unrighteousness, but present yourselves to God as those alive from the dead, also your bodies to God as weapons of righteousness." Did you notice that a person can present their body to sin, or they can present it to Jehovah, but not both at the same time? If a Christian deliberately presents his eyes to pornography, any worship he renders to Jehovah, no matter how hard he works with the rest of his body, is no longer holy. Jehovah simply does not consent to share our hearts with pornography. Does your heartfelt love for Jehovah move you to keep on guard and avoid disappointing him? Next, we'd like to examine with you 4 ways in which all of us have to keep on guard in our conduct with others. First, it's necessary to avoid flirting, whether the other person is single or married. Now, what would you describe as flirting? Put simply, it's treating someone as if you're interested in marriage when you're really not. How can you tell the difference between just displaying personal interest, pursuing an honorable courtship, and flirting? Well, a lot depends on what your intentions are. For example, a single brother compliments an outgoing single commuter sister on the way she dresses at work. On another occasion, he mentions her new hairstyle. From time to time, he sends her a text message to check that she arrived home safely. Is he just displaying personal interest? His comments go beyond being concerned for her well-being, don't they? He's even telling her that he finds her attractive. She would definitely be justified in concluding that he has romantic interest in her. Is he flirting? If he's actually interested in a possible courtship, his actions may not be wrong. But if not, he would reasonably be viewed as flirting. Could persons of the same sex start to flirt? Consider a situation. A group of single brothers has a meal together, and after most leave, 2 of them remain behind in the room drinking alcohol. At one point, one asks the other if he has ever woken up with an erection. Their conversation starts to touch on sexual matters. Are they flirting? Their conversation can arouse sexual desires in them, even though they're of the same sex. This could easily lead to comments or curiosity about each other's bodies. don't deceive yourself thinking this could never happen. Keep in mind that alcohol tends to lower your inhibitions and can make thoughts that you'd normally suppress or view as repulsive seem acceptable, even inviting. What if a sister is married? Should you feel you can be more affectionate with a married sister than you would with one who's single? For example, a young single brother is adopted by a couple at Bethel, and he regularly spends time with them. The wife, who's 4 or 5 years older, hugs him affectionately in public and views him as her little brother. He goes to their room frequently, even when the husband isn't there. And he feels comfortable talking to the sister, even about his problems. He claims they're like family. Is this appropriate? No, this is dangerous. Neither one of them is immune to becoming emotionally attached to the person who is dedicating so much time and attention to them. Of course, there is nothing wrong with becoming friends with more mature couples at Bethel. But keep in mind that a married person belongs to their mate. A sister's husband has the right to expect that he will be her closest friend and the only one giving her romantic attention. What if you're married? Being married does not give a brother permission to be overly affectionate with sisters other than his wife. You, too, need to be on guard to avoid even giving the impression of flirting. What does Jehovah think of flirting? Go to Proverbs 12, verse 22, please. Lying lips are detestable to Jehovah, but those acting faithfully bring pleasure to him. Really, flirting is lying. It's a cruel and dangerous form of lying that disregards Jehovah's counsel about marriage. He hates it, so it's important for you to see it the same to remain holy. A second area we want to draw your attention to is the need to keep on guard against sexting and sexually explicit video chatting. Sexting can mean sending sexually explicit messages or even improper photos or videos by some electronic means. This is especially important to keep in mind when you're romantically interested in a sister. Jehovah created men and women in such a way that the more time they spend together, the more attracted to each other they feel. That's really a wonderful gift from Jehovah. Because of it, an honorable courtship can fan what starts out as a romantic spark into the flame of joy, a love that lasts a lifetime and keeps growing. But keeping in constant contact with a sister you're interested in and without taking the proper precautions can be like throwing gasoline on that spark, turning it into something destructive. For example, can you see how the brother in the following situation has let his guard down? While video chatting with his girlfriend, they start making some references to sexual subjects. He ends up becoming aroused, and after they finish their conversation, he masturbates. The next time they speak, the conversation goes further and becomes sexually explicit. Now, both start masturbating while connected, but without exposing themselves to one another. Now, obviously, at this point, both need to get help from the elders because their conversations are becoming more and more unclean. They're on the express route to sexual immorality. But what should he have done to be on guard and not let things get to this point? At 1 Timothy 5, verse 2, Paul told Timothy to treat all his Christian sisters with all chasteness. You need to do the same, especially towards a sister you have a romantic interest in. Be aware of the danger and keep your conversations clean. Make spiritual matters a regular part of your communication. Avoid communicating late at night when you might be more likely to let your guard down. In doing so, you demonstrate that you're a spiritual man capable of caring for your prospective mate's relationship with Jehovah. Next, we'd like to help you to clearly understand what the Bible means by the phrase sexual immorality, a very serious sin that can quickly destroy your relationship with Jehovah. In the Greek scriptures, that phrase is used to translate the original word porneia. What does that mean exactly? Porneia is sexual relations involving persons not married to each other. It includes acts such as oral sex, anal sex, and masturbating another person. It always involves deliberate manipulation of the genitals and at least one other person or animal. When a Christian commits porneia, the elders always have to provide assistance. Do the genitals of both need to be manipulated for there to be porneia, such as when two people have sexual intercourse? No, both oral sex and anal sex involve the manipulation of the genitals of only one person. Does manipulation of the genitals always involve the use of the hands? Not necessarily. For example, suppose a brother pays a stripper to perform a lap dance that lasts several minutes. She grinds her clothed genitals on his leg while he's fully clothed. He becomes aroused, but doesn't ejaculate. Was that porneia? His genitals aren't being manipulated, and he's not touching the woman's genitals with his hands. However, he is committing porneia by allowing her to use his leg to stimulate her own genitals. Can there be porneia without skin-to-skin contact? Say a brother lies down on top of his girlfriend while both are clothed, and they simulate having sex. Are they committing porneia? They have their clothes on, but the genitals of both are being manipulated, so they've committed porneia whether a climax is reached or not. That means that even some provocative forms of dancing, such as when a man rhythmically rubs his pelvis against the buttocks of a woman as she rubs herself against him, can also amount to porneia. What if a person fondles the genitals of another, but doesn't actually masturbate them? For example, a brother sits on the lap of one of his male friends. His friend puts his arm around his waist and at one point fondles his crotch over his clothes. Is that porneia? Although the second man didn't go as far as masturbating the first, he is deliberately stimulating his genitals. Because there's fondling, caressing, stroking, or rubbing involved, this act constitutes porneia. What are the following situations? Two brothers masturbate in front of each other, but without touching each other. Is it porneia? The answer is no, since neither is touching the other person. However, it is a flagrant disregard for Jehovah's laws and a serious sin that has to be addressed by the elders. Finally, to keep clean before Jehovah, you have to fight against homosexual behavior. You've surely noticed that we've mentioned several situations involving homosexuality throughout this talk. Why do you think that is? Satan is desperately promoting this perverted practice. It's no exaggeration to say that he's flooded his world with propaganda in favor of homosexuality. It's not realistic to think that you can't be affected by his efforts just because you serve at Bethel. At times, you may find yourself struggling with same-sex desires, or you may realize that others are doing so. That doesn't mean that you or they are homosexuals, but it does mean that you have to keep on guard to remain holy. How can you do this? Examine your conduct carefully and honestly so that you avoid situations that can foster homosexual desires. For example, do you avoid unnecessarily exposing yourself to others, such as when you're in the locker room? Are you always modest, even in front of your roommates? Do you have the habit of excessively touching other brothers, hugging them tightly, slapping their buttocks, rubbing them, giving them massages, and so on? Of course, at Bethel, you may sometimes have to use a community shower, and that means you may not be able to completely avoid being briefly undressed in front of other brothers. In some cultures, it may be acceptable for two men to walk hand in hand, or local customs may permit the use of saunas while unclothed. But if you find yourself struggling with same-sex desires, it would be wise to honestly examine whether you need to make adjustments in your conduct with other brothers. Proverbs 6, verse 27 asks, "Can a man rake fire to his chest and not burn his garments?" The answer is no. Thus, to keep yourself clean from homosexual desires, you cannot put yourself in situations that could bring them to your heart. For instance, what do you think of the following situation? After exercising together, two single brothers go back to shower in a room. Afterwards, one gives the other, who's wearing only a towel, a massage. One or both of them get sexually aroused. They have put themselves in an extremely dangerous situation, don't you agree? Although Satan is waging war to influence people's thinking on the subject of homosexuality, Jehovah hasn't changed his view on the matter. Homosexuality is unholy and repugnant to Jehovah, and he will not tolerate it among his dedicated servants. Does your love for Jehovah move you to have the same view? We've identified several serious dangers which we have to keep on guard against to be clean before Jehovah. Of course, more is involved than just avoiding what's bad. What else do you need to do to keep your path clean? First, have a regular program of meaningful Bible study. When you regularly spend time with Jehovah by means of your Bible study, it will make your love for him and his commandments grow. Obeying him will make you happy. Second, be honest about your weaknesses. Notice what the psalmist prayed in verses 36 and 37. "Incline my heart to your reminders, not to selfish gain. Turn my eyes away from looking at what is worthless. Preserve me alive in your way." Did you notice that he recognized he needed Jehovah's help to incline his heart? In other words, to make him want to do what was right? Do as he did. Humbly acknowledge before Jehovah that you need his help to fight wrong desires. Be specific and tell him what they are, but then also act decisively. Turn your eyes away from worthless conduct and entertainment. Reject any wrong thought as soon as it comes to mind. What should you do if you now realize that you are or have been involved in some type of unclean or questionable conduct, such as what we've considered? Frankly, you might be embarrassed and even afraid to ask for help. That's not uncommon. But please think about what Psalm 119, verse 176 says. I have strayed like a lost sheep. Search for your servant, for I have not forgotten your commandments. Like the psalmist, if you've been involved in unclean or questionable conduct, seek help from the elders right away. We love you and want to help you get on a clean path again. The governing body loves you too. It's our heartfelt prayer that you, our precious young brothers, will keep your path clean and joyfully walk in the law of Jehovah forever.